Wanted Death is a third-person action game that is best described as a 6-hour-long fever dream that still manages to stretch itself too thin, while still having plenty of crazy moments that are worth your time if you enjoy budget titles that struggle to be more than they are. Published by 110 Industries and developed by Soleil, if you're not familiar with them, their previous works include games like Valkyrie Elysium, Ninjala, Travis Strikes Again, and of course Devil's Third. If you're familiar with any of those, you already know the level of quality they are bringing with this one. They announced Wanted at the 2021 Tokyo Game Show, together with another game going by the name of Vengeance is Mine. But as of now, there isn't anything more than this short teaser. It has been described as having brutal melee mech combat, augmented with a time manipulation mechanic that adds a fascinating twist to the encounters. It also had a release date of 2023, but the publisher page also says 2024, so who knows. What I do know is Devil's Third, which I never played with myself, so if there are any nods in here, I didn't catch them. The only thing that seems to connect them is the unapologetic crude and cool factor, but toned down, as Itagaki is no longer around and too busy making NFT games, whatever that implies. For this, I completed an entire playthrough on the original PC version release with a keyboard and mouse setup, so the experience may vary between platforms and control settings. Without any further ado, here is Wanted Death. The game begins with a quick flashback to the protagonist, Anna Stone, being forced into taking an offer to get out of prison, jumping right back into the present day, where she is leading an international ragtag team of convicts who work for the Hong Kong police. I'll just tell you right now that the story doesn't really matter. It's not even a question of being good or not, it's just the way that it's presented, which seems to have several important parts missing. At the same time, this game has the strongest case of whiplash I ever seen from a game, with several tonal shifts that place their focus on unexpected points. Like, it's an already short game, and they still manage to make sure to include several shower scenes, and then an entire gag of how the police cafeteria food is bad. But it's completely beyond having a coherent story. I don't even know if this makes any sense, but imagine Deadly Premonition, but bad. One time the protagonist is trying to be mad at something that just happened, and literally seconds later there's a rhythm minigame with awful patterns and silly dances like it's trying to be Yakuza. Then a robot questions your humanity, and then you are thrown back into the fully rendered police station, where there's barely anything to do but collect randomly placed collectibles and go to the next stage. Like it tried its best to be Astral Chain, but everyone there talks shit directly to your face. Of course, the police station is reused later as one of the 5 stages, that's why it has so much detail to begin with. But at least the environment is fun to explore the first time, to see all the stock photos and decorations they used. This roller coaster of a pacing just keeps going until it comes into a full stop, and the game just abruptly ends without much ceremony. You fight the bad guy that appeared once in a cutscene, and that's it. And it's not like it surprised me, like, look at him, you can't just use a black service uniform and not be evil, at least not nowadays. They really don't explain anything very well, like, oh, that one robot wasn't actually a robot, but the protagonist is maybe one of those not robots. There's an achievement that says clear the game on all difficulties and view the ending, which implies that there is some sort of extra ending, but forgive me for my lack of interest in that possibility, because I certainly don't want to replay any of these in harder difficulties. There are also some animated cutscenes that happen when the protagonist passes out randomly, but they barely make any of these any clearer. The entire existence of this game is so bizarre that it's definitely worth not skipping any of the cutscenes, because there's some funny shit in there, intentionally or not. It's all pretty weird, but it gets weirder when you consider the presence of Stephanie Houston, best known for her previous role as Quiet in Metal Gear Solid 5. Here she plays the team's gunsmith, Vivian, with an alright performance, at least in comparison to the rest of the cast. But as a promotional thing, she also did a couple of shorts tied to the game where it's spoofing those typical cooking shows, and then there's her 80s disco album which has some of the tracks featured in the game, and is heavily highlighted in the game's publisher page. This also leads to the other announced game of the pair, which Stephanie is being credited as an associate creative director on that. I don't know what to do with any of this information, I just found it weird for her to have so much push in all of this for some reason. With that out of the way, is the game part of the game actually good? First of all, it might seem to be a shooter with melee combat, but don't be fooled. You will quickly realize after just one stage that the game is balanced closer to melee than the firefights, so let me explain. You have your main rifle and a handgun, with the rifle used for solving specific waist-high cover arenas, because even if you add 100% accuracy, there are still going to be enemies left when you run out of bullets, which then leave you with just a sword for whatever there is left before the next checkpoint. And you are gonna run out of bullets every single time, because there are always way too many enemies with too much health and that barely drop any ammo back. The handgun has infinite bullets, but it's mostly used to string melee combos and to parry specific attacks. Think of Bloodborne but without the option for stupid fun cannon builds. You can also customize your main loadout, but do you see all of these stats over here? None of that matters in the long run, so don't even bother. You can get a second weapon from the enemies, but they are mostly useless. All the rifles have stupid recoil and spread, but might as well be shooting peanuts, so either get one of those shotguns, which you have to be shooting point blank and even at full ammo you're only killing 1 or 2 enemies, or you grab the grenade launcher, which you'll probably kill yourself because the bad collision limits will make sure the grenade is going to explode right in your face. All of this, and I was only playing on normal difficulty. I can only imagine how bad things get on the highest option. Nope, never mind. I tried it, and Japan hard is just a bad time. Mostly because you can't regenerate health back by attacking with a sword, plus the enemies being even harder to kill. There is an easier difficulty unlocked after you die enough times, but I didn't try it, so I don't know if it helps that much. It's all a damn shame, because the gameplay is almost on point. There are these rare moments where everything connects, and it's pretty satisfying, but the lack of polish and the antagonizing checkpoint placement don't leave much room for player improvement, much less enjoyment. The cover system is pretty erratic, and most of the times it prefers to work against you, as it only activates automatically by being near to specific walls, when you never know if the wall you need will let you cover against it. Weirder is if you turn around while being in cover, the character just gets up for absolutely no reason. This leads me to talk about the parry. I love a good parry. Dodging is pretty cool too, but parrying is so satisfying because of the high risk reward of deliberately putting yourself in danger to attack right back, so it's usually a great game mechanic. Unfortunately, the parry here fucking sucks. Well, not the parry itself, but everything else surrounding it. I can definitely feel how it was constructed by people who worked on Ninja Gaiden, and by that, I mean they were in the same room when someone else built it. Even if Ninja Gaiden was stupid hard, the reason it still worked is because the gameplay was carefully built to the exact frame. Here, the frame window to parry is really short, even with the upgrade that increases it, which paired with the way the combat locks you into your actions, mean you can barely cancel into subsequent moves. For example, if you just shoot your handgun, you're not going to parry shit, because you literally can't move. This leads into parrying being more defensive than offensive, because it's much better to just wait for the enemies to attack, while you're certain that you're free to parry than to risk a hit, which in later levels will probably lead you to get comboed to death. The game has a skill tree as the only real means of progression, but it starts by having you unlock stuff that should already be included from the start. And even then, by the half point, you already have everything unlocked, even stuff you might never want to use. At the same time, if you're stuck in a particularly hard sequence, your points get reset to before the checkpoint, so it's not like you can farm points to cheese it. It's pretty baffling, one of the first things you unlock is what they call bullet time, but that is just a one-time special attack that consumes the meter you build from melee combat. The actual bullet time you unlock at the end of a completely different category for some reason. Depending on the stage, you are accompanied with your gang of buddies, but they don't do anything significant, even when you buy their respective skills. The only one that matters is the doctor, who revives you once per checkpoint when he's present, and you'll know when he isn't, because those are usually the worst sections of the game. When you consider the limited enemy lineup, it's obvious that the game ends up mixing up some bullshit encounters, like putting several ninjas, which are enemies that force you to engage almost exclusively in melee, at the same time as an entire squad with heavy guns. And don't even get me started with the dudes with the grenade launchers. I sure love losing more than half of my life out of fucking nowhere. You also get these optional chainsaw sequences where you can just instantly cut enemies, but the problem here is that you're stuck using it until it runs out, while still being vulnerable to damage from the surrounding enemies. Plus, when it runs out, you lose your previously held second weapon. After trying it just once, you bet I didn't touch it ever again, especially because the animation looks so boring and slow. In comparison, the finishing moves are pretty fast and cool, so at least there's a nice variety to that, and it works well to create some breathing room to check your surroundings. There's a New Game Plus option, but you can't pick a different difficulty, and the gameplay is just not deep enough to incentivize further replays, so truly a one and done game. When you put all of this together, of course you get middling reviews, because it requires patience to work around its flaws and get some fun out of it. If you try to force your way through, you'll probably just get a frustrating experience, which comes largely in part to the stingy placement of the checkpoints. I previously said that the game was around 6 hours, but my final time was closer to 9, which let me assure you that those 3 extra hours were anything but fun because of that. Some refinements and extras would go a long way, something like extra costumes or being able to play as the other characters. Your party members are already there, I don't see why they couldn't just swap the models. I wish I could play as the hot waitress from the beginning, can't believe she barely appears in the game. That was a complete waste of a good character. For some reason, this game reminds me of 2009's Wet, which I also never had a chance to play, so that's where my claim ends. Also Oni, with that mix of melee and gunfighting, if anyone even remembers that one. Anyway, if you want to play a cool third-person shooter, just grab Binary Domain. It was made by the Yakuza guys, of all things. It's usually pretty cheap nowadays, with the enemies dynamically breaking down where you shoot them. You actually have teammates that are important to both the story and the gameplay. There's a hot Chinese lady, a cool robot baguette, and your boy, Big Bo. If you want even more style, play Vanquish. Hell, play both, they're both good. Fuck, Vanquish is so cool.